Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this week's Horror and Ghost Stories. And I just want to take this opportunity to welcome everybody who has subscribed and is new. I am now 324 subscribers strong, and it means the absolute world to me, so thank you. Now, before I get into tonight's story, I just want to say this video may be unsuitable for younger viewers, but for those of you who are feeling brave, be prepared to be scared. And now, without further ado, let us begin. Tonight's story is titled The Vengeful Old West Bank Robber Spirit. Our story begins in the Old West, where a criminal went town to town, robbing the banks and shooting the owners after the robbery had took place. That was until one day when he heard of a bank that had double the loot. The robber couldn't resist the temptation and couldn't believe his luck, but little did he know he would be walking into a trap and would be caught by the sheriff and deputies. Realizing he was outnumbered, the robber surrendered his irons and was put behind bars. The next day he was met before a judge who sentenced him to hang by the neck until dead. That day he was taken out to the galleys to meet his fate. The executioner asked if he had any last words, and he replied, "Yes, anyone who sets foot in any of the banks I have robbed will meet their deaths, and the last thing they will hear is my irons shooting before they drop and die." Soon after the robber's last words, he was put to death. Days would pass, and as promised, the deaths would follow in all of the banks the robber had robbed from, with gunshots being heard from the outside, eventually leading to the towns to be abandoned, making them into ghost towns. Many years passed, and the towns would be untouched until the present day. A group of paranormal investigators were looking for places to investigate and would come across one of the towns and decided to set up camp and investigate. Throughout the day, they would look at all the old buildings and the town's surroundings and see how the townsfolk would have lived. Later on that evening, the investigators would be joined by a psychic medium and would begin to set up their equipment before venturing into the town. The lead investigator had established that they would start with the cemetery and work their way through the buildings, leaving the bank till last. And as soon as the investigator had mentioned the bank, the medium's senses started to get awakened and had felt the presence of an evil man, of someone that meant them harm. She described the person to be tall and had a noose still attached to him, and was pointing his weapons at the investigators in turn. Before the medium could get any more, the spirit had disappeared. The team were baffled and shook up by what the medium had told them, so they decided to press on, but with caution. They all went to the first building. It was a saloon. The lead investigator wanted to try some EMF work and started calling out to the spirits. There was a creepy silence with no readings on the EMF, but mysteriously the EVP turned on by itself and started to record, but stopped again shortly after. One of the investigators had played back the EVP, and what they heard was shocking and frightening. The spirit started laughing and said, "Ha! I hope you can duck quickly enough to dodge my lead fire." The team did not know what to think of this and noticed the medium acting strangely. She said, "The spirit is approaching," and with that all they heard was footsteps coming from the outside, growing louder and louder and louder until they stopped. All of a sudden, the EMF meter spiked to red, and the REM pod turned on and started getting louder. Then all of a sudden, it stopped with no explanation for a few seconds. And again, out of nowhere, they saw a figure outside of a man the medium had described. The figure had struck a match so they could see his face. The lead investigator had turned to the cameraman and said, "Are you getting this?" He returned back to the figure, but this time he was pointing his weapons towards them. The lead investigator shouted, "Everyone down!" They all heard the sounds of gunshots and glass smashing. They were all on the ground and had their hands on their head in fear of what was going on. Then all of a sudden, everything went quiet, and the team cautiously stood up to find the windows still intact. "How is this possible?" one of them said. "I could feel the glass falling and I saw the flash from the gun firing." The lead investigator said, "We need to pack up and get the hell out of Dodge." With that, the rest of the team and the medium got themselves together, packed away their equipment, and started walking towards the door. They turned round and saw the lead investigator was stood in silence. They said, "Are you coming?" He said, "I'll catch up with you guys in a minute. I'm just getting myself together." To which they replied, "Don't be long now." The team started walking back, and the lead investigator had grabbed his coat, ready to go, when he noticed a dark figure walk past the window. He walked outside to see what was there and saw the figure walk towards the bank, and then proceeded to follow it into the bank. The door had shut behind him, and the spirit said, "You damn fool. You just sealed your fate when you set foot in this bank. May your soul be forever stuck in this place." And with that, 2 blasts from the robber's irons were made. The team had heard what had happened and ran back quickly to find their lead investigator, dead on arrival, pushed out of the bank door. They had made phone calls to the police department, who then arrived at the scene with the coroner. When the coroner gave his report, there was no signs of bullet wounds. It was just as if the lead investigator had died from shock. After this incident had occurred, it was decided the old ghost towns in that area were to be demolished, so that no one else would go there, and 10-foot brick structures were put in place where the banks once stood, with a sign saying, "Do not demolish." And that concludes tonight's horror stories. I hope you've enjoyed tonight's story, and if you have done so, please be sure to like, share and subscribe. And I will end the video, as I always do, by saying bright blessings, blessed be, and where you can be anything at all, then please be kind, because being kind is the most beautiful person that you can be. And also, remember, don't have nightmares.